This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. A retired U.S. Lieutenant Colonel, Kevin Randle has been studying UFOs for nearly 50 years. Kevin has investigated some of the most famous UFO cases in the world and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries about UFOs. Considered one of the leading experts into the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including the recently published Roswell in the 21st Century. Now, here is the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
And hello once again. We have returned from our 167-hour hiatus with A Different Perspective, and I truly am Kevin Randle. Take no substitutes, I suppose. I am going to be joined by my friend, and I probably should say long-distance friend, Alejandro Rojas, who is the director of operations for Open Minds Production, the host of Open Minds UFO Radio, editor and contributing writer for Open Minds TV, and emcee for the International UFO Congress. He is also a blogger for the Huffington Post. For several years, Alejandro has been official spokesperson for the Mutual UFO Network. I've had trouble with MUFON for quite a long time. Mutual UFO Network as the Director of Public Education. As a UFO paranormal researcher and journalist, Alejandro has spent many hours in the field investigating anomalous phenomenon up close and personal. Alejandro has been interviewed by the media organizations around the world, including the largest cable and network news agencies, with regular appearances on Coast to Coast AM. He has been featured on the Travel Channel, Syfy, National Geographic, and E, and that surprises me, E. And now he is on the greatest of radio programs here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, A Different Perspective. Alejandro, welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
I understand that we grew up in the Denver area at different times. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. I forgot about that. I forgot you were from Denver also.
Well, you grew up, I think, on the other side. I was in Aurora, and you were in Westminster or Littleton, or?
Yeah, I was out by the hills. So my family was in Denver and Globeville. You know, right at if you're in Denver, near the Mousetrap there.
Yes.
But I actually went to school mostly out in the West in the foothills where it's really pretty and we don't get to tornadoes or anything, which is nice. So in the Lakewood area, I went to Wheat Ridge High School, actually. But now my family is mostly in Aurora. So out in your old stomping grounds.
Well, my sister used to live in Aurora, but now she lives in Centennial, and she didn't move. They just changed the name of the town for some reason.
Exactly, and I always get confused in which is where, and so I always refer to all of that area as Aurora still.
I think of it that way, too. And, of course, I graduated from Hinckley High School, which at the time was way out in the boondocks on the eastern side of the Denver-Aurora area. Now it's, I think, just built up all around there. So There you go. So now we've reminisced long enough about Denver and done our bit to promote Denver, I suppose. You've been interested in UFOs, paranormal research, and that sort of thing, I assume, for a very long time. And I'll ask you the basic question that annoys the hell out of me, but I'll ask you anyway. How'd you get started?
It's funny that you say that because, the first time I have someone on my show, I always like to go over that because it's interesting. But I know what you mean, that people who do a lot of these shows get a little tired of the question. So here's my pat answer for that one. So I did grow up mostly skeptical, but interested. Essentially, in high school, I was into math and science and everything. In fact, my first major was engineering. I wanted to be a rocket scientist. But at the same time, with my roots in Denver and in New Mexico, my roots go back quite a bit. So I still had this, attachment to Native American and sort of Mexican kind of openness to the paranormal and everything. And so I was interested in that. And then really what made me go gangbusters into this was in 2001, the disclosure event that happened that Dr. Greer put together. And those were a lot of great witnesses and people I had never heard of.
The disclosure event, you mean 2013 in Washington, D.C.?
No, 2001 in Washington, D.C.
Oh, a different disclosure event. Okay.
Yeah, the first one.
Wanted to get that focused there. Okay.
Yeah, the first one back in 2001, and now everybody tries to repeat it year after year, which is kind of funny because unfortunately, the first one didn't have much of an effect. By that time, I was a journalism student, and I was watching it, and I had spoken to others about what they had thought about it, and people said, if there's some big news, we'd cover it. And I was surprised that this event was not covered because there were some important people there, high-profile people that you don't see in the documentaries and stuff like that. So,
well, let me interrupt. Let me interrupt you here because I'm getting right up against my break time here.
Okay.
I'm joined by Alejandro Rojas, who is a UFO expert, a world traveler, and that sort of thing. We will be back learning more about UFOs and what he's done right after these messages. So stick around.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
And we are back. I am joined by Alejandro Rojas of Open Minds Productions in television and radio and all kinds of things like that. And for those of you who are interested, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, you can get a list of other programs on the network for all kinds of areas of the paranormal. Take a look at the hosts and what they talk about. You might find something you find interesting. I'm sure you'll find something that's interesting. When we went away, Alejandro was talking to us about how he got started in the paranormal research, the UFO research, and he had been at a disclosure program or project in 2000 or around that time, and he was just getting wound up when I cut him off. So Alejandro, the floor is now yours. Take it away.
Yeah, well, I saw that event was going to take place, and then it took place, and I was shocked by what little coverage it did get, and there was a lot there that was presented I didn't know. So it was kind of funny. It had a huge effect on me. I just, for the next at least year, and I'm a pretty social person, I just like boarded myself up in my house. I mean, I was in school at the time, so of course I was living life. But if I wasn't in work or school, I was reading. And I read just tons of books and everything to figure out what I could. And that's where it all started. Then I joined MUFON out in Colorado at the time. You know, we were talking about Lakewood. Actually, it's nearby in Littleton that they were headquartered. So, and this was the international headquarters. So I was lucky. The Denver group was a great group. And then I got to be involved with the international group and eventually began to have more and more roles with that organization. And that's really how it all started. And during this whole time, I also did have an interest in other aspects of the paranormal. So I got involved with writing and conferences and investigations and stuff like that. So that's how it all began for me.
But your interest was mostly UFOs or UFOs and paranormal or
it was
a combination?
It was a combination. However, I've really, the UFO aspect has just really kind of taken hold and taken most of my time in all of this arena. In fact, I've written quite a few of different paranormal, phenomena for the Huffington Post, but mostly I just don't have time, as you know, or as you probably deal with. It's just this, it's enough just to deal with this one topic.
Meaning UFOs.
Exactly.
Because there's so many subsets.
Mm-hmm. There's
UFOs.
So much, yes.
I mean, you've got crop circles, you have abductions, you have crash retrievals, you have MJ-12, you have all of the contactees, you have all these subsets of UFOs, so it's hard to encompass the entire field and get a good idea of what's going on. When you did your field work, or are still doing your field work, was there a case that was particularly interesting to you that stood out in your mind?
Mean as far as, some of the best cases out there type of things?
Well, the best case that you've run across, the best case that you've investigated, the one that really kind of excites you.
Let's see. It was kind of a combination, and I think that's what really got to me as a MUFON investigator, kind of this death by 1,000 cuts sort of thing. In that you do a lot of these investigations, and now this is something I deal with on a daily basis, is a lot of these cases where it's just anecdotal, or you're dealing with witnesses and you work with these witnesses and they're just very credible, and they've seen incredible things. And although it's just anecdotal, and personally I don't put much stock in anecdotal information, not to say it's false, but just to say it's nothing I can prove. It's not very substantial as far as evidence goes. But as far as my personal beliefs, it does. And I think a lot of personal beliefs of people out there, it does have an effect on your personal beliefs, and it can be substantial in that matter. But of course, when I'm thinking about overall, I'm thinking about how do I prove these to my colleagues in journalism? Is this substantial enough to the mainstream? And in that aspect, anecdotal information is not. But yeah, kind of a death of 1,000 cuts sort of thing. So a lot of great cases that I had looked into, and some mind-opening. I thought abduction ideas were weird and fringe, and even now it's a big mystery to me. But I've met a lot of very credible people who have some incredible things to say, who seem to genuinely believe what they're saying. So So those were really interesting. And then, and in light of full disclosure, it was interesting to get involved with the Stan Romanek case. And of course, there's a documentary, and I can be seen in it, that is on Netflix now. Unfortunately, he has been less than honest.
Give us a little background on the Stan Romanek case, because I'm sure there's people out there who are not that familiar with it.
Yeah, and this is what a lot of people don't know even now, because unfortunately it gets lost. It started with a couple of very interesting sightings. In fact, the first sighting he captured on video was in Lakewood, and he was at a park, and this orange orb flew over, and he caught it on video, and there were dozens of witnesses at this park that saw this blinking orange orb float over, and it seemed to be, under control. This same object was seen soon after. It even, these witnesses, again, several witnesses that I've spoken to, And these witnesses talked about how it went over them. One of them flashed a light at it, and it moved. It reacted to the light. It moved up, and then it continued moving along. So really credible sightings. Then this guy, he had these videos of these alleged creatures and stuff like that. I got to know him and his family very well. His family, especially.
Let me interrupt you here. You say he's got videos of creatures. You mean alien beings?
Yeah. Essentially, a couple videos he's allegedly captured of these beings. And so I got to know his family very well.
What were the beings doing? You got a video. You can see the alien beings. How do they look? What were they doing?
Well, in these videos, I want to get to that, but so I'm trying to. What I'm getting at is my kind of story of how I approached all of this.
Okay.
And how I got to know the family and the people around and these other witnesses with these videos. And I think that's important because MUFON did investigate this first sighting. They did talk to several witnesses. They took the video to experts. There was a lot that happened there that in the background. But what I'm saying here and what was interesting about this is the credibility level was very high. I knew and became friends with a lot of the family members during this time. So that's when I came into it. Then eventually, when they felt essentially that they weren't sharing much information, and at one point they asked me if I would help them when situations occurred, and become essentially the only investigator on this case that was getting a lot of attention. So at that time, then, yes, I did get to see these videos, some of which were very dubious, some of which looked more credible, which I can't explain to this day. Now, the ones that you want to know about are the alien ones. And he had a couple videos. In one of these videos, an alien appears to be looking into a window, and this window is about 8 feet high or something like that. And it was a weird video. I didn't know what to make of that one. Let
me interrupt. You say by 8 feet high. Is the window 8 feet or is it 8 feet off the ground?
The window ledge is 8 feet high off the ground. Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah. So it was like a tri-level, and so this is a window. I think a bedroom window is what it was. In the other video, it looks like this thing is kind of looking in the screen door window. And he captures a little bit of that. And these look typical, the big head, the big eyes. Those were not as convincing, those videos. But a couple other videos he had were of these orbs, and I'm not even sure if they're online, but 3 different videos of balls of light, and they do not move along the contours of the walls and structures in the background like a laser would. They seem to be like luminous balls that are just moving along on their own. These I find very mysterious. Those are the best orb videos I've seen. I've seen maybe a few others that are convincing or interesting. Most orb videos or pictures, I think, are not very interesting. They're typically dust or reflecting light. But so it was this mixture. And then being with him, I did have a couple sightings when I was in his company. Now, I don't know that he has anything to do with those personally, because, we were all sky watching a couple times, and they were not anything, mind-blowing or that extraordinary, but something that I can't explain. So, for instance, here's an example. We're at his house, and we're sky watching, and I see what we see practically every night, what looks like a satellite, one point of light moving steadily across the sky. But this time, this point of light turned around. It did this J-hook, turned around, and faded out. So that was extremely strange. That's one of the few UFO sightings that I've had that I can't explain. So that's kind of,
So you're saying that when you're in the company of Romanak,
correct,
you have seen UFOs and that sort of thing.
Correct.
And these are not structured craft or anything. They're more balls of light.
What I've seen, yes.
You haven't seen any aliens.
No.
And you are suggesting that the alien videos are not very credible?
I would say that overall that that's true. Although they were more credible at the time, they're less credible now. And here's why I say that. They were more credible at the time because there was other aspects of the case that were interesting, and I had no evidence of any hoaxing or lying going on at the time. They're less credible now because I do have that. Stan has lied and hoaxed things. Even on my radio show, he tried to hoax this thing where someone called in and told him to shut up. And I believe that to be a hoax. I believe he's lied to me, and I believe he's tried to hoax a lot of stuff. So unfortunately, that's severely damaged the credibility of the entire case. And I would say of this documentary that's on Netflix, the guys who created it are great guys. I like them, but I don't feel, especially as someone who tries to adhere to journalistic standards, that they did that. They didn't tell the full story. They just told the story they wanted to tell, and they cherry picked. And that's unfortunate because I think, as a documentarian or someone telling, giving people information about a case, for better, you've got to have some integrity there, and you've got to, even if it's hurtful to people that you like, well, and this best because you could give a damn about how it affects people. You want the truth out there, which is something I really respect. I respect your approach on that.
Let me interrupt you here because I'm getting up against the break, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that's hurt Romanek's credibility, of course, is the criminal charges. And we'll kind of talk about that in a moment because I think that's an important part of the case as well. Mm-hmm. For those of you who are interested, you can find the website, openmindstv.com. Take a look at some of the things that...
Openminds.tv. No .com, just .tv. Actually.
Okay, .tv. I thought I actually copied it directly off the Google search engine, openminds.tv. We will be back right after this. And of course, there'll always be more information at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. And as I say, we'll be right back. So please stick around.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
And we are back with Alejandro Rojas. I stumble over names all the time. I don't understand it. I know these people. I know how to pronounce their names, and I just can't do it on the radio. I do not know why. We're talking with him. And as we made it clear on the last segment, it's openminds.tv if you want to learn more about his website and that sort of thing. We were talking about this Stan Romanek guy and his UFO sightings. And I think one of the important points we need to point out, and it probably leads directly to credibility, which is the criminal charges. Was that one of the reasons that you kind of backed off from the case?
No, actually. It was the lies and everything that made me back off. Because really, someone can be a criminal and still be experiencing paranormal phenomena. So that him being dishonest about what may or may not have happened is one thing, but prior to that, he had already been dishonest. So I already had major concerns, and especially in that, I felt he had tried to hoax a couple things that I had been, I caught him in. So
well, let me be clear on this though. what you're saying is the criminal charges, if somebody has criminal charges leveled against them, it does harm their credibility. But for you, in this particular case, it didn't make that much of a difference because you'd already run into other problems with the stories and the information he was submitting.
Exactly. So, yeah. So that's it in a nutshell. And if you can tell, I'm a little uncomfortable talking about the whole affair. But now that this video is out there, and not just that, it's you asked the question of early cases that had an effect on me, and that certainly did. And it's important to be, I guess, to give full disclosure. So yeah. So for better or worse, that is a case that was. Well,
didn't he also have an alien implant that he was going to give to ABC News or somebody to take a look at? And when it came time to produce the implant, he said it had disappeared?
No. Well, I shouldn't say no. Now, this is... I don't remember ABC News having anything to do with that. However, yes, he did claim to have an implant. It was something he gave to Nancy Talbot to research. She did have friends who did look at it, and they felt they did find some things mysterious about it. And she was going to look into getting some more analysis done. Stan had asked for it back, and she went to go get it, and it was gone. And she says to this day she can't explain it. That's never happened to her before. And I do personally feel, to me, Nancy Talbot's a very credible person. So I do not believe she would lie. I've known her for many years now. And so I can't explain that. But that wasn't so much his fault in that case. But yeah.
Well, that kind of takes us off in a bizarre direction, I suppose.
It does.
What didn't he have to admit that he'd faked some of the moving objects that appeared in the background on some early interviews and things like that?
He did. There was one interview in particular where I guess he was not aware of the frame of the video, and so you can see his hand, throwing up a couple objects while he's being interviewed, and then pretending like these objects came out of nowhere and hit him in the head. And so that really especially destroyed his credibility out there. Rightfully so. That was absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah, then, at the time, and even to this day, I'm mostly pretty quiet about things. I don't like to talk disparaging about people or anything, but I do try to, be honest when asked questions. And so at that time, for me, it was kind of like other people got to kind of see why I have distanced myself or been more quiet about the whole thing.
But doesn't a case like this, where there's obviously hoaxing going on, doesn't that harm legitimate research in the whole kind of UFO field? Because that's what people always remember?
Well, true, but there's nothing you can do about that. There's lots of cases that are like that. You've ran into so much of that with Roswell. So it's one of the difficult things about this field is there's much more static than there is, signal, and so it's difficult to weed through all of that, and it takes discipline and rigor to be able to be careful about what's signal and what's noise, and that's something that you're very good at, and it's difficult to do, and most people are kind of cognitively lazy, I think, and that they don't seek to do that, and
I'm not sure that it's so much cognitive laziness as it is just a will to believe. And so they search out the information, they cherry pick the information that kind of supports their belief structure, as opposed to looking at the disconfirming information or something that would disprove a case. So
I think that there's some of both, but I think you're right. I agree with you, actually, that it is the majority of this want to believe. But when it comes to researchers, I guess that's what I was thinking of when I said that. I think there are some researchers who do truly seek to find, what is truth out there, but then they do get a little bit lazy. And I think of some Roswell investigators when I think of that, or I think of people who have looked into the MJ12 files who fall into that category.
Well, let me stop you there and ask you a straightforward question. MJ12, authentic or hoax?
Hoax. And that's what baffles me with people who have looked into it. There's no doubt it's a hoax. It's an admitted hoax by the person who came up with the word MJ12, or at least was the first to release that alleged project. So, yeah, hoax.
Even the first documents that some say, well, these are real, and all the subsequent documents are fake. The whole thing is a hoax.
Especially the first documents. And the problem is that the very first documents are not what people perceive to be the very first documents. People talk about, the first documents are like the SOP or this the Eisenhower memo. Those were not the first documents. People who know better call those the first documents when they actually know the first documents were the ones that Richard Doty had released while he was working for the Air Force Office of Special Investigation.
And this would be the Aquarius telex,
exactly,
which deals with a UFO sighting that somebody had taken the whole document and retyped it on a form similar, or pasted on the headings, and inserted a line about MJ12 being in it, so it's sort of a confirmation of MJ12. Mm-hmm. And I think when you say it's an admitted hoax, Bill Moore admitted that he retyped the document.
Right,
so we don't have the original.
And Richard Doty has said that he knew it was not real, that he claimed it was just information that the government wanted him to put out, which we don't know for sure. But regardless, the people involved with this document say it's a hoax.
And I'm going to interrupt here again, because you say, Doty put it out, maybe officially, but maybe not officially. It might have been something that Doty had kind of cooked up on his own.
I think that's possible. We don't know for sure that isn't the case. I think when you look at the Aquarius document he provided to a man named, Paul Benowitz, who he was trying to make believe, give him information to believe there are UFOs and aliens and stuff like that. If you look at that document and the documents that he released during that period of time, they're terrible. They're written poorly. The grammar's ridiculous. Even the stories inside that are contained in these documents are absolutely ridiculous. I think the information he then, brought Linda Howe to Kirtland Air Force Base, and then gave her this ridiculous information, all of it, which is really silly. And I think
let me interrupt here one more time, and I hate to do this, but I want to point out, I think Linda Howe reported accurately what she was told by Doty when she went to Kirtland. It just doesn't have any bearing on reality. He was making the whole thing up, and she believed he was telling her the truth from inside sources.
I agree 100%. And what's interesting, I find, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, is as soon as Bill Moore, the author, got involved and started to work with Doty, these documents were much more well written, much more sophisticated, and there was a major change at that point, I felt, which to me is evidence of then Moore participating with Doty in the creation of these documents, even though they both say that it was some mysterious DIA agent, or this person's background has changed throughout the years.
Well, let me just say that Moore had been saying for a number of years, and he told it to Stan Friedman, he told it to Brad Sparks, he may have told it to other people, that he had run up against a brick wall in his Roswell investigation. He was thinking about creating some kind of a document to show to people in the hopes that it would get them to open up and tell him the stuff that they weren't telling him. And all of a sudden, he and his pal Jamie Chandra end up with the Eisenhower briefing document and the Truman letter.
Yeah, and this is a great example, though, of what you were talking about. Doesn't that hurt ufology? Of course it does, and so does the MJ12 documents. I mean, a lot of people don't understand, and that's why I have such a passion and have looked into this so thoroughly, is that a lot of the mythologies that the UFO community believe in today are based on these documents. And when you follow that thread, you find they come from dubious beginnings, and that's a problem. It's static, and it's not signals. So I agree with you.
How much time and effort and money is spent researching the MJ12 documents, which are never going to lead anywhere?
Exactly. So much. I mean, even when I expressed, and I know you've gotten into this, but even when I expressed disappointment with the Move On board, because of course I worked with them so closely for many years, in the nature of this symposium coming up this weekend, the response, one of the main response came from Bob Woods, and his response, because he's very much he spent a lot of his own money in looking into these documents, and his response was, well, we know from these documents that this is true and that is true, and it's like, no, we don't. These are not credible documents. So yeah, unfortunately, a lot of what's done even today by the largest UFO investigation organization is motivated or influenced by these documents that just aren't credible.
Well, I was always I found what I thought was the fatal flaw in the Eisenhower briefing document, which was the El Indio Guerrero UFO crash of December 1950, and it's told by a guy named Robert Willingham to Todd Zeckel, who told it to Bill Moore, and shows up in the Eisenhower briefing document. But it's clear to anybody who's paid any attention that Willingham made up the story. He was not an Air Force fighter pilot as he claimed. He was not an Air Force colonel as he claimed. And yet here's this story in the Eisenhower briefing document as if it's legitimate. And if Willingham made up the story, then that just kind of kills the entire Eisenhower briefing document as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, and others have pointed out, and I've even asked Stan Friedman about this on video and in interviews, that the list of characters supposedly in MJ12 was a list that he and Moore had came up with while speculating.
Let's explore that in just a few minutes, because we're right up against the break again.
Okay.
This is, in fact, a different perspective. I am with Alejandro Rojas. We will be talking about MJ12 and the cast of characters when we come back, and take a look at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com, and we will return shortly.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
I am back on a different perspective with my guest, Alejandro Rojas. We were talking about MJ12. And when I was forced to take a break, Alejandro was just to talk about the list of people who are the members of MJ12 and how that came about, and that you'd asked Stan Friedman about it. So the floor is now yours on that.
Yeah, so I asked Stan, I've heard that, and looking into this, it looks like you all had come up with that same exact list, you and Bill Moore. And he said, yeah, we did. And I was like, well, didn't that seem suspicious to you that maybe Bill Moore had taken your conversations and put that in the documents? And he said, no, to me, it confirmed that we were right when we suspected this. And it was, he said, and plus there was one name on there that we had not discussed that I was surprised to see, which was Menzel, who was a skeptic and an astronomer who was very anti-UFO. And he felt that in researching Menzel's background and finding he had connections with intelligence, that confirmed that he would be a member of MJ-12. But to me, that's not a confirmation whatsoever. Just because someone's involved with intelligence doesn't mean that they're involved with hiding, government secrets around aliens and UFOs. So,
but if you go back into that time frame, which was the 1940s, almost every scientist you can name would have had some connection with the government during the Second World War, and a lot of them who were involved with code breaking and that sort of thing, which put them into the intelligence category. Dr. Buskirk, who was brought into the St. Augustine crash by Gerald Anderson, when you looked at his background, you discovered he'd been an officer I believe he had intelligence connections during the Second World War, and Stan Friedman used that to discredit him, saying that he had was I guess obeying his intelligence masters when he denied that Anderson had been out there on the scene of a crashed UFO. So I think that really doesn't disqualify anybody or suggest there is some kind of liar about what was going on. So,
which is funny because his primary witness, his number one, the first witness that got him involved with Roswell, worked for intelligence. So,
yes, Jesse Marcel.
Jesse Marcel Sr., the first guy to look at the crash material.
Having been a staff intelligence officer in the Air Force, not that long after Jesse Marcel, and I hate to date myself that way, but it was only like 20 years later I was a staff officer in the intelligence. I always thought the role of the staff intelligence officers in that environment, meaning he was working with a bomber wing, I was working with a airlift wing, the role of the intelligence officer was really that of a journalist, which was gathering information about places we would be going, things that we might see, problems we might have, and alerting the flight crews to that. It wasn't like we were out there spying on anybody or any of that sort of thing. It was that sort of benign thing going on. So, but that's a good point, that the guy that got him dragged into Roswell was an intelligence officer. And
right.
Cabot being the CIA guy, the CIC guy, counterintelligence corps guy, had a rule more like you think of when you think of intelligence. So, that's kind of an interesting point.
Yeah. So I'm certainly not big on the MJ-12 documents, and I've gotten in conversations, as you have. In fact, one of the first time I met you was at a MUFON symposium, and it was in Denver, which is one of the ones I was helping put on, and I was helping out at the tables, and I was sitting in between you and Stanton, and listening to some of your banter back and forth, and it was funny because you can be kind of a goofball. And I was like, who is this guy? It was really funny. You were cracking me up.
Well, that's my job, and I don't do enough of it here on the radio program, I'm afraid, because we just don't have time to kind of do that. But I take the phenomenon seriously, but sometimes you just have to make fun of it. Yeah. And I know one of the things that I was showing Stan at that conference was a document from the Navy SEALs website, their Hall of Shame. And it had Gerald Anderson on it because he'd claimed to be a Navy SEAL and there was no evidence that he was. And I thought, doesn't that hurt his credibility? And Stan said, well, he just wasn't sure about that. And he was going to look into it. And I had the document right there to show him that was a screenshot from the website. So, you have to look at all of that stuff. And I think that, the backgrounds of people, when we look at them, we've got to look at the backgrounds of the people who are telling these tales to be sure that they haven't made up stuff in their background, like Anderson being a Navy SEAL or Frank Kaufman being an intelligence NCO when he in fact was in administration and that sort of thing. You have to look at that sort of thing and apply that to the stories they're telling to determine whether or not it is something that's authentic.
Yeah, and that's the danger of wanting to believe, and I think that's just something we always have to police ourselves on making sure our biases are not getting in the way. What we want is not something, that we're not cherry picking information, and that can be difficult. And I think I'm aided in that I don't want to believe, and so many I think do, and that can be troublesome, and we have to be careful of that. I really am not married to whatever outcome or whatever the information shows me. I just want to know more than anything.
One of the things that tripped me up at the beginning of the Roswell investigation was we were talking to these military people, and I would believe that what they were telling me about their military careers. I just couldn't believe people would be making that stuff up. And then
it's shocking.
I found a book called Stolen Valor, and you just read about these people who have come out and claimed to be great heroes. The most decorated guy, I think, in the Delaware National Guard turned out to be a complete fraud. He was wearing a whole bunch of medals and telling stories that just simply were not true. I didn't think people would go to that length. I know about war stories and you kind of embellish things and that sort of thing, but that's really different than saying, well, I was a high-ranking officer like Willingham did. So I was a high-ranking officer in the Air Force. I flew fighter jets and I saw this UFO crash. That's completely different than kind of embellishing a war story that you were technically involved with. So I just was surprised by that. But that's why I now check the backgrounds of people who tell me that they have military careers. I attempt to check it out to make sure that they're not falsifying that.
Because it's true, you really can trust no one, especially when you're seeking answers, and in a field like this. Because I have a background. I have a degree in psychology, and it's industrial psychology, and I have a real interest, and it pertains to this field and false memories and lies and the way the brain works to create these sort of fantasies and stuff like this. And it was shocking to me when I discovered and saw the work done on how many people claim to have a military background who do not. And in this field, people will say, well, why would that person be motivated to lie? Why would this person be motivated to make up these big elaborate lies? I don't know why they would be motivated to do it. However, I know many, many people do, because we've been proven over and over and over again that people have done it. I don't know why they do it.
I think part of it is draw the spotlight. If I tell a wild enough story or an interesting enough story, I'm going to get on television. I'm going to get invited to be on radio programs, and that's a very powerful draw in and of itself. It's not really monetarily driven. It's just psychologically driven.
And this comes back to something when we talked about Romanek and this idea of what Ben Hansen calls legendizing. So he was on that show Fact or Fake. Great. Yes. He's got an FBI background. I love this guy. He's a good friend of mine. But he talks about legendizing, and he applies it to like the Romanek case, in that maybe he really did have a couple exciting, really good videos that he captured of UFOs. And, he loved that spotlight, and so then began to crave that spotlight and manufacture situations to keep himself in that spotlight. And I think that kind of does happen. And I love that term, then, legendizing.
Well, you've actually described Willingham, who had the original story of seeing the UFO crash on the Mexican-Texas border. But by the time he was done spinning his tales, he'd been involved in 7 investigations of UFO crashes. And so it wasn't just the one story. Now it became many, many more stories about crashes and that sort of thing. So I think that's a wonderful term for explaining part of this phenomenon we deal with.
Right. Yeah. So wild.
We're just really running out of time here again. Is there at your website, openminds.tv, they can take a look at your background, and there's a lot of stories that you've written about UFOs and that sort of thing there?
Oh yeah, tons of stuff. We update it daily, where we update it with UFO News Daily. Surprisingly, I always comb the headlines out there, the mainstream media headlines, and post those on a daily basis regarding UFOs and astrobiology and things like this. And surprisingly, there's a lot of stuff out there, and a lot of it is, mainstream media taking sightings and such seriously. So we have that on a daily basis. We have sighting reports from MUFON that we post there, and other investigations and news as it comes up that we have on our website on a daily basis. So yeah, at openminds.tv. And then we also have, of course, the UFO Congress. So it's we've won the Guinness World Record for the largest UFO conference, and that's a really fun event that happens in February here in the Phoenix area, which is perfect place to be in February because the weather is great, unlike many places in the country. So yeah, you can find out about that at ufocongress.com.
Well, thank you, Alejandro. We've had a wonderful conversation. It went by way too fast and went into areas I didn't expect it to go. And there were things that I wanted to ask you that we just getting done. So I'm sure that we can get you back at some point in time to chat about some of that stuff.
Definitely. I'd love it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
For those of you who are interested, we'll be putting up some information at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. And for those of you who are interested in the Roswell case, as I always say, take a look at